So, your LG washing machine has decided to stop spinning, and it's flashing this mysterious SE code at you. I know, it's frustrating, but don't worry. We're going to treat this like a detective case. That little code is our first clue, and right now, you and I are going to follow the evidence, line up the suspects, and get to the bottom of this mystery together. All right, let's crack this case.
Here's our game plan, our case file, if you will. First, we'll figure out what this SE error is actually trying to tell us. Then, we'll start with some really simple checks, our first clues. From there, we dive into a deeper investigation of the parts, we'll profile the usual suspects based on the symptoms, and finally, we'll reach a verdict. Is this a repair job, or is it time for a new machine?
So what's the deal with this SE error? Well, at its heart, it means there's a motor control fault. Basically, the brains of your washer are telling the drum to spin, but for some reason it's not getting up to the right speed, or it's just not holding that speed correctly. Think of it like a communication breakdown between the computer and the engine of your washer.
Okay, and this is a really important distinction to make right away. You've probably seen the UE error before, right? That's just an unbalance error. It means your towel's all shifted to one side. It's a simple mechanical thing. But SE, the spin error, that's different. That's pointing us toward an electrical problem, which means our investigation has to go a bit deeper than just rearranging the laundry.
So let's start by drawing up a list of potential culprits. You know, every good detective needs to know who they're looking for, and that's exactly what we're going to do now.
Here are our persons of interest. Now, sometimes a really lopsided load can trick the machine into thinking there's a motor problem. But more often, we're looking at things like worn-out motor brushes, a bad sensor that's supposed to be reading the motor speed, or one of the control boards going bad. Less common, but still possible, is a physical jam, or even the motor wiring itself giving up the ghost.
All right, first things first. Before we start taking things apart, let's do what any good investigator does. Start with the easy stuff. Let's gather some initial clues.
And before we go one step further, and I am absolutely serious about this, unplug the washer from the wall. Safety is number one, no excuses. We're dealing with electricity here, so let's be smart about it.
Okay, with the machine safely unplugged, where do we begin our search for evidence? Well, believe it or not, the answer is right there, inside the drum.
First, the simplest check in the book. Open that door and just move the clothes around. You never know, a single heavy, waterlogged blanket could be the whole problem. Next, take the clothes out and give the empty drum a good spin with your hand. What do you feel? How does it move?
And this right here, this is our first major break in the case. If that drum spins nice and freely, with just a smooth, quiet hum, our investigation is now pointing towards an electrical culprit. But if it's tough to turn, if you feel a grinding or hear scraping noises, well, now we're hunting for a mechanical problem, like a bad bearing, or maybe a sock that's gotten jammed somewhere it shouldn't be.
Okay, so let's say your drum spun freely. That's a huge clue. It means we're probably dealing with an electrical issue. So it's time to get a little more hands-on and start interrogating some of the main components.
Here's our technical to-do list. We're going to take a look at the motor brushes, if your machine has them. We'll check the drive belt. Then we'll break out a multimeter to really test the motor. And finally, we'll do a good old-fashioned visual inspection of the control boards and all their wiring to see if anything looks obviously wrong.
Now, don't let the word multimeter scare you. Honestly, think of it as a lie detector for the motor. We're just going to ask its electrical parts a few simple questions to see if they're telling us the truth about their health.
Look, this chart makes it super simple. When you test between the motor's winding pairs, you're looking for a low number, somewhere between 1 and 10 ohms, and they should all be pretty much identical. If you see OL, that just means open line or a broken wire, or if the numbers are way different, that's a bad sign. Then test from each wire to the metal motor casing. You want to see OL. If you get any number at all, it means there's a short, and that's definitely a problem.
And here's a pro tip that doesn't require any tools at all. Just use your nose. Seriously, when an electronic part fries, it gives off this really unique, sharp, burnt plastic smell. If you get a whiff of that near the control boards, you've probably just found your culprit.
Okay, we've gathered our evidence, we know how the drum feels, we've got our multimeter readings, maybe we even smelled something suspicious. Now it's time to put it all together and connect these clues to our most likely suspects.
This is where it all starts to make sense. See, if the error only pops up with really heavy loads, you're probably looking at worn-out brushes or control board that's on its last legs. If you heard that grinding noise we talked about, it's almost certainly something mechanical. And what if the machine just hums or clicks but never even tries to spin? That points directly to a dead motor control board or a broken wire inside the motor.
And this right here is the key piece of insider information. For most modern LG machines, the direct drive ones, the #1 cause of an SE error is not the motor. It's the motor control board. That little board fails way more often than the big, heavy motor it controls. So if you have a newer machine, this board is your prime suspect.
So, we followed the evidence, we've interrogated the witnesses, and we've identified our prime suspect. Now it's time for the final part of our investigation, sentencing. Are we going to go for a repair, or is it time for a replacement?
And you know, that big decision usually boils down to one simple question. How much is this going to cost me? If our #1 suspect, the motor control board, is guilty, you're probably looking at a part that costs somewhere between $150 and $300.
And if it turns out the motor itself is the problem, well, that's going to be a little more, usually somewhere in the $200 to $400 range.
So, here's how you make the final call. If it's just something simple like motor brushes or a belt, that's a pretty easy DIY job. But swapping out a control board or the whole motor, that's getting into more advanced territory. And remember, ordering the wrong expensive part is a painful mistake. If you're not 100% sure, calling in a pro for a diagnosis can actually save you money in the long run.
So there you have it. You started with a confusing error code, but now you know how to be a detective. You've investigated the clues, you've run the tests, and you've identified the suspect. The only question left is, what's your final verdict going to be? Thanks for joining me on this investigation.